We sent out a press release earlier today regarding the activities of the Metropolitan Auto Theft Task Force and the Drug Enforcement Administration. First thing I want to point out is that back in May or June of 2018, the Metropolitan Auto Theft Task Force received information about an individual who may be involved in selling VIN switch vehicles. They are expensive vehicles, high-end vehicles. The Auto Theft Task Force looked into it, and we found vehicles that were in fact VIN switched, and that led us to more VIN switch vehicles, which led us then to a group of individuals that we identified as being involved in the illegal manufacturing and distribution of marijuana. As a result of that, the 18th Judicial District took our case investigation between the Auto Theft Task Force and DEA to a grand jury, and the grand jury indicted 8 individuals. This morning we executed 8 search warrants at different locations throughout the metro area. Of those 8 locations, we arrested 8 individuals. 4 of those were indicted by the grand jury in the 18th Judicial District, and 4 were arrested on probable cause arrests. The result of those search warrants is that we recovered several more stolen vehicles. We recovered a large amount of cash. We recovered numerous marijuana plants. We recovered marijuana that had already been processed and packaged, ready for distribution. We seized marijuana grow and processing equipment, and a lot of this equipment was used to make marijuana hash oil. And in a minute, I'm going to ask DEA, Mr. Scott, Special Agent? Okay.
Special Agent's perfect.
Special Agent Scott to kind of talk about the dangers of the manufacture of this hash oil. And we also recovered a large amount of firearms in our searches. We do have 2 outstanding suspects that were indicted. We're still looking for those suspects. I do want to make sure that I emphasize that we do not believe there's any danger to the public, we are trying to locate these 2 outstanding individuals. As you know, in the press release that we did earlier this afternoon or later this morning, we identified who was all involved in the Metropolitan Auto Theft Task Force. I'd also like to thank some other agencies: the Westminster Police Department, Thornton Police Department, North Glen Police Department, Federal Heights Police Department, Adams County Sheriff's Office, the 18th Judicial District, the West Metro Drug Task Force, the North Metro Drug Task Force, Commerce City Police Department, and the Brighton Police Department. They all facilitated the DEA and CMAT, that's the term for the Metropolitan Auto Theft Task Force, in executing these search warrants. Nobody was injured in the execution of these search warrants, and they all went off without a hitch, and that was a good thing. So that's the basic information that we have. I'm now going to turn it over to Acting Agent. I'll do this right. Agent Scott.
My name is Tim Scott. I'm the Acting Assistant Special Agent in charge in the Denver Field Division. One thing I'd like to say before we start is I want to kind of highlight the fact that these type of operations started at a state and local case dealing with auto theft, and then they move into a marijuana case. So we have state and locals working with DEA, our federal partners, in a case like this. This is a force multiplier and maximizes our ability to do our job and go after these criminal organizations. The other thing I'd like to say is we're seeing a lot, not just this investigation, we're seeing criminal organizations from outside the state of Colorado moving here to continue to conduct their criminal activity, and they melded in with the black market marijuana. And that's been its increasing phenomenon that we're seeing here. The last thing I'd like to say is I just want to put out there about the butane honey oil labs, okay? When you seize these labs, they use butane in the process of converting processed marijuana stems into THC oil, which is highly pure form of THC. Some of this stuff is up to 90%. There is a huge danger, fire danger, explosive danger with these butane honey oil labs. And the fact that we're still seeing these, black market marijuana grows that also combine these honey oil labs is a huge danger to communities. And some of these houses are in residential neighborhoods. So thank you. I'm going to have Matt's next with the 18th Judicial District.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm the Assistant DA for the 18th Judicial District, which is Arapahoe, Douglas, Lincoln, and Elbert counties. And you're sitting in the 18th right now. While this case has been indicted already, and there are multiple people who have been charged through the indictment, the case still remains ongoing. It is going to be, as you would expect, just based on what you've heard thus far, a very complex investigation and an ongoing investigation. And in light of that, there's not a whole lot we can talk about. But one thing I do want to echo, as Tim said, is that this is and was a collaboration, a team effort, a very complex investigation that was made a whole lot easier based on a lot of different law enforcement organizations working together in conjunction with the District Attorney's Office, CMAT, DEA, the DA's office, and all of the law enforcement agencies that you just heard mentioned a few minutes ago were involved and did a great job working together. This is the beginning of a relatively long road for the DA's office, and I know the rest of the organizations involved will stay and collaborate on the prosecution of these cases as well, and we hope that we get them to the proper conclusion and hold offenders accountable in the process. But because this is a very early juncture in this case, there's a lot to be done, and I expect a lot more teamwork to follow. Thanks.
I'll take if you have questions, if we can answer them, we will. One thing I would like to point out is that all the VIN switch vehicles that I spoke about earlier were not used just in the distribution of this marijuana. Some of these VIN switch vehicles were sold to unsuspecting victims. Most of them were purchased online. We do have victims out there that paid several $1,000s for these cars, and because they are stolen vehicles, unfortunately, they don't have those vehicles anymore. So I do want to put a warning out to the public that there are a lot of stolen vehicles that are for sale online. Whether there's a lot of vehicles for sale online. Some are legitimate, some are not. And I'm just going to reiterate that old phrase: if it's too good a deal to seem to be true, it probably is. There's a lot of things that a citizen can do to try to verify, or at least do some legwork to find out if these vehicles are actually steals or not. And there's a lot of websites you can go to. You put in the VIN number for the car, and those VIN numbers, it'll come back and it'll tell you what the history of the vehicle is. So some things to watch out for on those: if they say there's 100,000 miles on a car, and you look at the history of the maintenance history of that vehicle, and it says the last maintenance was done at 210,000 miles, you know that something's probably up with that. So there's a lot of things that citizens can do to protect themselves. I'm sorry that we have victims out there of this, but you know, we're here to help, and we're trying to eradicate auto theft the best we can. With that, I will open it up for any questions.
Can you explain to us how it works? How would you get a Lamborghini switched over to VIN number? How does this all work? What is the...
Right. There's numerous methods that somebody can do. As I said, the vehicles that we recovered were VIN switched vehicles. And so there's different methods for how people do that. It could be from a salvage yard. They pull a VIN off of a salvage vehicle and put it on there. They may use forged titles. So there's numerous methods that people will try to do in order to cover the stolen vehicle and make it look legitimate.
Can you walk us through, were these luxury cars used to transport marijuana at all across state lines? Or what was the connection between marijuana and these fancy cars?
I can say that some of these vehicles were brought in from out of state, and they were transported back out of state. Some of these vehicles were simply used by the people manufacturing the marijuana to use just for personal business or for their business of manufacturing the marijuana. So they used them in multiple ways. So it's about as close as I can get to giving you the full story on what these vehicles were used for.
So no, you can't say for sure that pot was put in the Lamborghini and then driven to Florida?
So well, I can tell you I can't tell you for sure. I can tell you I don't think the Lamborghini was used for that purpose, but I can tell you that it has been done before, and I can't be specific about what vehicle was used for what. There are some vehicles that may be used for this purpose, but again, to get any more into it would maybe jeopardize some of the facts of the case that are yet under investigation.
Let's talk about the 70th Ave location. I saw some guys in pretty significant protective gear Also, so it looked like some significant equipment that was seized. Talk about the seriousness that you guys handled this and the amount of equipment that was taken
Right.
from some of these locations.
So I'm not going to discuss any particular location, what we got out of any particular location. I know that some of you all were probably out at some of these locations, and if that's what you saw, that's great. I can't verify or talk about that because that is part of the investigation. What I can tell you is that when we send personnel into any of these types of grow houses or anywhere that's manufacturing, especially marijuana, that can be a health hazard for them, whether it be mold, whether it be the dust, whether it just be them be allergic to any of the chemicals that are being used. So they do use personal protective equipment in order to protect themselves. Also, it's good evidence collection for them not to contaminate anything that they may be taking, whether it be for fingerprints, DNA, or whatever. And I'm not saying that's what they did at that house, but I know that everybody who was on the scene who was going into the house were ordered to have personal protective equipment on.
Special Agent Scott, could you speak to why it's seemingly perfect, normal subdivisions are often targeted of black market crime?
The basic answer is there's so much black market marijuana here that, like you said, there is not a neighborhood in probably Colorado that's not affected by this. I'm talking $1 million plus homes all the way down. You know, a lot of, especially they like to be in the rural areas because it's a lot easier or a lot harder for law enforcement to you know, surveil them or you know, conduct operations out there. But you see it everywhere. Rentals are a big thing we see all over the place. I can't give you an exact answer why they go to each neighborhood they go to, except to tell you they're in every neighborhood.
What should folks living in these neighborhoods look out for? You know, like I talked to a guy during one of the raids this morning by the auto body shop. He's like, you know, I saw a Lamborghini parked there not too long ago. Then
Well, if you're in a neighborhood and you're in a 1,200-foot ranch-style home and you have 3 of the largest air conditioning units in the back of your house, that's a pretty good sign you got a marijuana grow. Okay, you're in the state of Colorado, and especially where I live, most homes don't even have air conditioning. Okay, so when you see that kind of stuff, when you see people coming and going in the middle of the night, when you see, you know, U-Hauls regularly showing up to the house, when you see extra venting being cut all around the, you know, all around the house, when you see the windows in the basement or the garage sealed up so you can't even see in, those are all indicators of a marijuana grow. When you in the winter, you'll see homes actually sweat. You'll see ooze coming down the sides of the homes because of all the humidity that's inside the home. Another indicator of a marijuana grow.
So do these residents just call the local police department and say, hey, I think my neighbor's involved in black market marijuana?
Happens all the time. We get so many of them. Be straightforward, we can't even deal with them all.
Can someone address the plates on the vehicles? So I understand the VIN switch, but once the VIN is switched, are they stealing plates? Are they registering vehicles? How's that working?
No, normally they will attempt to get a legitimate title and then go to the local DMV office and license the vehicle legitimately. Or they have a front, a business front, or they have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, significant other, somebody that's not really involved in their manufacturing business, who's not really tied to them, go and license these vehicles for them. So there seems to be no connection there. So they use a variety of methods. Sometimes they will come here, they'll have plates from out of state. And as you all know, Colorado has a lot of people coming in, so seeing an out-of-state plate usually isn't a big deal anymore, where if you saw an out-of-state plate in Colorado, you thought they were probably just passing through because they were here visiting, but now that's not the case. So, but they are trying to legitimately title these, and it's not just in Colorado. Some of the cars they'll get from other states, they'll get the legitimate title from another state, and then come to Colorado and retitle it again in Colorado. So the paper trail gets harder and harder to try to follow to get back to the end result.
Can you guys track the sale or purchase of any of this specialized equipment?
Most of the specialized equipment, you got to remember, there, you know, Colorado, marijuana is to some degree legal in certain areas. So you can buy. You're referring to like the butane honey oil labs.
Yeah.
It's commercially provided. It's a legal product. A lot of this stuff there's nothing intuitively illegal about possessing it. It's more of what they do with it. So it's kind of hard to, we kind of have a problem of tracking it just to go track it. You
It's
know?
not stuff you can go down to Walgreens or Target.
No, not Walgreens, but there's
Something-
commercial, there's grow places like you see the advertisements all over the city. You can order it online, you can order it at these places. It's a pretty common, you know, they all have dual purpose, so that's kind of where the problem lies.
And does legalization make it easier or harder to separate those that are working in the black market here in Colorado?
Well, of course, because you have the inherent, it's legal, you know, and so we have to go in and prove what they're doing is illegal, you know, yeah, it is more difficult to prosecute a case when you have certain factors in place.
Did you guys have any estimated totals today for a number of plants or cars or firearms?
At this point in time, we can't give that out. You know, that'll be done much later following prosecution.
Was there any resistance from the folks who were arrested today? Or willingly?
No, we did not have any resistance by any of the suspects. And again, as I said, no officers, none of the suspects, no citizens were injured at any time today.
In the indictment, you said 4 folks who were arrested were indicted by the grand jury, and then 2 more who were indicted are being sought. But you said there were 8 total, so is that leave 2 somewhere that had already been apprehended, or?
I'm sorry, there were 6 indicted. Okay, I'm sorry.
By the
6
grand jury?
6 indicted by the grand jury. We've got 4. We're still trying to locate the other 2. But then we also arrested 4 other people who were directly involved in the cultivation and distribution of the marijuana.
So how many arrests today?
8 total,
8 total arrests today.
correct.
Excuse me.
Any guess to the number of manpower you guys put into this?
A lot. I read off the agencies here. You know, one of the things I will say is that the Metropolitan Auto Theft Task Force, Commander Mason's battle group, the West Metro Drug Task Force, the North Metro Drug Task Force, DEA, they're not just employees of that entity. They're all employees from different agencies throughout the metro area. That these law enforcement agencies see the value in these multi-agency partnerships. And through those multi-agency partnerships, we're able to do a lot more work, and we're able to do a lot better. So of those agencies that I just mentioned, I could probably name off 15 other agencies that are part of those groups. The ones I mentioned just may not be directly involved in it. They contributed patrol officers to help us with these. So there was a lot. As far as hours go, a number of people, right now I honestly couldn't tell you that.
And what happens to Lamborghini?
It's going to be the commit, no. That'll have to go through the court process.
Can you describe any of the cars other than Lamborghini, just general?
Sure.
Like Escalades,
So,
Corvettes?
yes, so the vast majority were 2016 to 2018 model vehicles. We had some Cadillac Escalades, we had some GMC Yukons, Chevy Tahoes, Ford F-250s, F-150s. Trying to think what some of they were mostly General Motors and Ford's high-end type vehicles. We did have a Porsche, and so you know there's a whole myriad of really nice cars that these people were using.
I know you can't go into great detail, but can you talk a little bit about the guns? Are they a mix of handguns and assault rifles? Roughly how many? A dozen, 2 dozen?
I can tell you they were a mix.
A mix?
Yes.
Any number at all? A dozen?
No, I can't share that right now.
Okay. But a mix of handguns and rifles?
Yes.
The 2 people you're still looking for, do you believe they're in Colorado? Could they be elsewhere?
That we don't know. We believe one may have left the state, but we're not positive on that.
And have you identified any type of a hierarchy within this organization, a leader, so to speak?
That is part of the indictment, is that some of the indictments were for the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act, which is basically, can't think of the terminology.
Isn't it mini, like a RICO?
Yeah, but basically it's organized crime. That there is a hierarchy to it, people working for people. So that is part of the charges in the indictment that they were indicted for.
It's similar to like the federal statute RICO, racketeering charges.
Can you describe it all? You said there were some folks who had unknowingly purchased these vehicles and then sounded like have since had them seized. You know, how many of the total?
I do know, but I can't share that. Sorry.
You mentioned there's a lot of rural houses, they're all over in different neighborhoods, and you guys made a great effort to make all these arrests and find out all these people. Do you think there's ever a point where they'll reassess the whole process here in Colorado and the other states that have legalized it, and maybe you guys will change your tune? If so, or why not?
I have my own personal opinion, but I can't address that, sorry.
He wants to stay employed.
Yeah.
If millions in cash is seized, can the people who've been victimized buying the cars, can that money be pooled to repay them?
I'll leave that one up to you. I don't do the seizures. Sorry. Can you address that?
I can't answer that completely. I can tell you this, and specific to most cases like this, the assets will be going through, the federal system for forfeiture. Honestly, I have never heard of a situation like that where they've come back. So I really can't answer that. I'd have to get back to you. I could find out for you though.
Generally speaking, in Colorado, there's not going to be a direct translation or transition of those funds from one location to the victims, but there is a restitution, a relatively robust restitution statute. So it wouldn't necessarily involve, and probably would not at all involve, those funds, but restitution for any victims of crime would be covered in the court hearings and the court proceedings. And ultimately, the court, depending on the nature of the case, and obviously if there was a conviction, a court could order restitution to be paid. But that's probably all I could say as far as the state statutes control.
So right now, just those victims are out of the car and out of the way, right?
I think unfortunately that's the case right now, yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.